The world has been plunged into a state of profound crisis following a stunning and unprecedented ultimatum delivered by United States President Donald Trump to Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a televised address from the Oval Office that sent shockwaves through global capitals and financial markets, President Trump issued a direct and unambiguous threat, giving the Kremlin a stark choice with a strict deadline of 10 to 12 days. The American president declared that if Russia does not fully comply with a new set of American demands, primarily centered on a complete and verifiable withdrawal of all Russian forces from the sovereign territory of Ukraine, the United States will unleash a series of actions designed to, in his words, wholly and completely destroy the Russian Federation. The gravity of the statement, delivered in a calm but resolute tone, has placed the world on a knife edge, initiating a frantic countdown that could determine the fate of international peace and security for generations to come. The move represents the most significant and dangerous escalation between the two nuclear-armed superpowers since the Cuban Missile Crisis, dwarfing all previous diplomatic confrontations of the post-Cold War era. The ultimatum was the culmination of weeks of escalating tensions and what the Trump administration has described as Russia's continued defiance of international norms and direct warning from Washington. Speaking from behind the resolute desk, President Trump stated that years of sanctions, diplomatic negotiations, and indirect support for Ukraine had failed to deter what he termed Moscow's relentless imperial aggression. He argued that a fundamentally new and more forceful approach was now the only options left to restore stability and uphold the principle of national sovereignty. The president's address was short on diplomatic niceties and long on blunt pronouncements. He did not mince words, stating directly to his Russian counterparts that the time for games was over. He asserted that the United States, under his leadership, would no longer tolerate the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which he framed as a direct threat to the interests of America and its allies. The specific deadline, a window of 10 to 12 days, was described by White House officials as a deliberately short but still actionable timeframe for Russia to demonstrate its compliance through a massive and observable military pullback. The ambiguity of 10 to 12 days was seen by analysts as a classic Trump negotiating tactic, creating a sense of urgency and unpredictability. Immediately following the president's address, his top cabinet officials fanned out to elaborate on the administration's position and to begin the monumental task of implementing the strategy. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held an immersive press conference at the State Department, where he sought to frame the president's ultimatum as a regrettable but necessary final step. Secretary Rubio explained that all conventional diplomatic channels had been exhausted. He detailed a long list of alleged Russian violations, including recent attack on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and intelligence reports suggesting Moscow was preparing for a new major offensive. He stated that the United States had a moral and strategic obligation to act decisively. He also began a whirlwind of diplomatic calls, speaking with his counterparts in key ally nations, the leadership of NATO, and officials in Ukraine to explain the American position and to coordinate the ally response. His message was one of firm resolve, emphasizing that the United States would stand by its ultimatum and expect its allies to do the same. The military dimensions of the threat was underscored by Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth. From the Pentagon, Secretary Hegseth issued a statement confirming that the United States military had been placed on a heightened state of alert globally. While he declined to discuss specific troop movement, he confirmed that strategic assets were being repositioned and that the readiness of American forces in Europe had been elevated to its highest level in decades. He stated that the Department of Defense was prepared to execute a full spectrum of options to support the president's objective. His message was clearly intended to convey to Moscow that the American threat was not a bluff and that the military was fully prepared to act on the president's order. This included not only conventional military power, but also, as he hinted, overwhelming superiority in the domains of cyber warfare and space-based assets. The intelligence community provided the backdrop for this dramatic escalation. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and Central Intelligence Agency Director John Ratcliffe had reportedly presented President Trump with a grim joint intelligence assessment in the days leading up to the announcement. This assessment, according to sources within the administration, concluded with high confidence that Russia was not operating in good faith and was instead using diplomatic talks as a cover to regroup for a decisive military push intended to break the back of the Ukrainian state once and for all. This intelligence was presented as the primary catalyst for President Trump's decision to abandon the previous strategy of incremental pressure in favor of a high-stake ultimatum. The economic components of the threat is perhaps the most detailed and, for many observers, the most terrifyingly potent aspect of the American plan. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent outlined what would amount to the financial equivalent of a nuclear strike. In a briefing with financial journalists, he described a package of unprecedented economic sanctions that are being held in readiness. These measures would go far beyond any previous sanctions imposed on Russia. They are designed to completely sever the Russian Federation from the global financial system. The plan includes sanctioning the entire Russian banking sector, including the central bank, effectively making it impossible for Russia to conduct transactions in dollars or euros. It also includes a full embargo on all Russia's energy export, including oil and gas, and secondary sanctions on any country or company that attempt to purchase them. Furthermore, the Treasury Department is preparing to blacklist the entire Russian sovereign wealth fund and to seize all Russian state-owned assets held abroad. Attorney General Pam Bondi's office had been working in parallel to prepare the legal instruments to seize the personal assets of hundreds of Russian oligarchs and officials around the world. Secretary Bessent stated with confidence that these measures, if implemented, would trigger an immediate and catastrophic collapse of the Russian economy, leading to hyperinflation and a depression that would dwarf the crisis that followed the fall of the Soviet Union. The reaction from Moscow was one of fierce and defiant rejection. The Kremlin spokesperson, in a hastily arranged press conference, denounced President Trump's ultimatum as an act of unprecedented nuclear blackmail and a declaration of hybrid war against the Russian people. He stated that Russia would not bow to threats and that any hostile action by the United States would be met with a swift, devastating, and asymmetrical response. The Russian government placed its own nuclear force on high alert and announced emergency military drill across all its military districts. Russian state television broadcast a message from President Putin, who appeared grim-faced and resolute. He accused the United States of seeking global domination and of trying to destroy Russia as a sovereign state. He called on the Russian people to unite in the face of this existential threat and vowed that Russia would defend its territory and its people with all the means at its disposal. The rhetoric from Moscow was uncompromising, suggesting that there was little to no room for a diplomatic retreat and setting the stage for a terrifying showdown. The shockwaves from President Trump's ultimatum reverberate across the globe, throwing international alliance into turmoil. An emergency meeting of the North Atlantic Council was convened in Brussels. The allied nations of NATO found themselves in a difficult position. While many shared Washington's frustration with Russia's action in Ukraine, the sheer audacity and risk of President Trump's all-or-nothing approach caused deep alarm. Eastern European members, particularly Poland and the Baltic states, who feel most threatened by Russia, expressed strong support for the American stance. However, larger Western European nations like France and Germany were reportedly deeply unsettled, fearing that they were being dragged to the brink of a major European war. They urged caution and called for a last-ditch effort to find a diplomatic off-ramp, even as they acknowledged that their leverage was now limited. The United Kingdom expressed its full solidarity with the United States, but also stressed the need for allied unity and careful coordination in the days ahead. The European Union's leadership issued a statement calling for de-escalation, but appeared divided and uncertain on how to respond to the American ultimatum. China, Russia's most powerful strategic partner, responded with a carefully worded statement that condemned American unilateralism and coercive diplomacy. Beijing called on both sides to exercise maximum restraint and to resolve the crisis through dialogue and negotiation. However, behind the scenes, Chinese officials were reportedly scrambling to assess the implication of a potential collapse of the Russian state and the subsequent geopolitical vacuum that would create on its long northern border. The situation presented both a grave danger and a potential strategic opportunity for Beijing, and its leadership was watching with intense focus. Other major global powers, from India to Brazil, issued urgent call for peace. Their leaders acutely aware that a direct conflict between the United States and Russia would have catastrophic consequences for the entire global economy. The reaction in Ukraine itself was a complex mixture of elation and terror. The Ukrainian government publicly welcomed the strong and unwavering support from its most important ally. For years, Kyiv has been pleading for more decisive action from the West to end the Russian invasion. President Trump's ultimatum was seen as a potential game changer, a move that could finally force Russia to withdraw. However, this hope was deeply intertwined with fear. Ukrainians are on the front line and they know that any military escalation would take place on their soil. The prospect of a full-scale war between the United States and Russia being fought over their country is a nightmare scenario. The mood in Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities was one of tense anticipation, with people praying for a peaceful resolution but also preparing for the worst possible outcome. Global financial markets reacted with immediate and widespread panic. Following President Trump's address, stock markets in Asia, Europe, and the United States plummeted. The price of oil and natural gas skyrocketed to record high on fears of a full Russian energy embargo. Investors fled to the safety of gold and the US dollar. The world was suddenly facing the prospect of a global recession triggered by the geopolitical crisis. The world now holds its breath. The 10 to 12 days clock is ticking. Every diplomatic maneuvers, every military movement, every public statement is being scrutinized with an intensity reserved for moments of supreme historical importance. The fate of Ukraine, the future of the international order, and the risk of the cataclysmic conflict between the world's two greatest nuclear powers now rests on the decision of one man in Moscow in response to the stark ultimatum from one man in Washington. The path to de-escalation is narrow and treacherous, while the road to conflict is wide and terrifyingly clear. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to Stop Hating Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.